And this hearing will come to order. This hearing, we're looking at the prospects for reaching a viable nuclear agreement with Iran, one that increases our national security. And this has been and will continue to be one of the committee's top priorities. For those of us that have worked on this issue for a number of years, like Eliana Ross-Lehtinen and myself, Mr. Sherman, Mr. Engel, we remember well last year we presented, or last session, we presented legislation here that I and Mr. Engel authored that passed this committee unanimously, that attempted to bring more pressure on Iran by giving the Ayatollah a choice between economic collapse or compromise on his nuclear weapons program. It passed here unanimously, as I mentioned, and on the floor of the House of Representatives, 400 to 20. And some would argue, certainly we believe this, that the leverage that we've brought to bear has helped bring Iran to the table. But we've dealt with administrations in the past, whether Democrat or Republican. Mr. Sherman and I can tell you, in terms of sitting through many of these meetings, our frustrations with the delay in really bringing the type of leverage and sanctions to bear on Iran to get the type of deal that we thought was verifiable. Now, we've had a decade now of diplomatic negotiations over Iran's pursuit of nuclear technology in violation of the UN Security Council resolutions on this subject. These have reached their height over the past year as the Obama administration, along with the UK, France, Russia, China, and Germany, have been seeking to negotiate a long-term comprehensive solution to Iran's illicit nuclear program. And during these talks, Iran has agreed to limit its nuclear program temporarily in return for some sanctions relief. A final agreement would free Iran of sanctions, which has driven it to the which was, by the way, in our view at least, driven to the negotiating table by the previous sanctions that we had enacted here, while allowing it to maintain a mutually defined enrichment program to be treated like any other non-nuclear weapon state party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That best case would leave Iran as a threshold nuclear state. But worse, any limits placed on Iran's nuclear program as part of the comprehensive solution would, of course, based on this agreement, expire, maybe in 10 years, maybe sooner. But there's an expiration that's being discussed right now in the agreement. Negotiations, now into their second extension, appear to be stalemated. And that's even after U.S. negotiators move closer and closer to Iranian positions. According to the administration, big gaps remain, and a senior official hinted last week that talks may extend again come June's deadline. Meanwhile, the Ayatollah, since he's the one that makes the final decision here, has been advancing Iranian nuclear programs, pursuing new reactors, testing a new generation of supersonic centrifuges, and operating Iran's illicit procurement network. These actions clearly violate the spirit of the interim agreement. Yet the administration appears more concerned that sanctions designed to strengthen its negotiating hand, and which would have no impact unless Iran walks away from the negotiations, could sink an agreement. So let's be clear. If an agreement is sunk, it is because Iran has no interest in abandoning its drive to nuclear weapons, which is what many of us believe. Of course, Iran's nuclear work isn't Iran's only provocation. While Iranian diplomats put on a good face in a European negotiating room, its IRGC, its Quds forces, and other proxies have been busy working to influence and ultimately dominate the region. And this is what we hear from the Gulf states and from our other allies throughout the region. Iran is boosting Assad in Syria. Hezbollah continues to threaten Israel. In 2006, I watched as those rockets from Iran and Syria came down on Haifa. Today, there are 100,000 such rockets, thanks to Iran's production. And Iranian-supplied rockets to Hamas rained down recently on Israel. Frankly, last week, an Iranian-backed militia displaced the government in Yemen, something that we had heard about from the ambassadors from throughout that region. They're concerned that the Iranians were going to topple that government. It was, frankly, the toppling of a key counterterrorism partner of ours. Most in the region see Iran pocketing a nuclear deal and continuing with its domination. Certainly no winning game plan to stabilize the Middle East. Not to mention that Iran's horrendous repression at home continues. This isn't a negotiating partner that gives much confidence. If we are going to have any chance of a deal that advances U.S. national security interests, Iran's leaders have to feel that their only choice is a verifiable and meaningful agreement. And we're far from it. Worse, many in the region feel Iran is on the rise. Falling oil prices should strengthen our hand. But with the Obama administration yet to explain a single change as to how it will negotiate differently with Iran over the coming months, it raises questions. And while the administration reaches for a deal, it should do so understanding the regime's duplicity and its militancy. And when I say its militancy, the fact that the Ayatollah still leads chants of death to America and death to Israel, and Iran still speaks of Israel as a one-bomb country, and still speaks of its long-term confrontation with the U.S. This, again, gives the members pause who have dealt with Iran for a long period of time. In addition to more economic pressure, we should have an Iran policy with thought-provoking broadcasting to inspire Iranian dissent, a focus on its horrendous human rights abuses and illicit procurement networks, as well as bolstering allies in the region that face Iranian aggression. As one former intelligence official told the committee last year, Iran's nuclear program is just the tip of a revolutionary spear that extends across the world and threatens key U.S. interests. This is a regime that is playing for keeps. Yet sometimes it seems the administration is more concerned about Congress moving on sanctions than pressuring its treacherous and deadly negotiating partner that's on the other side of that table. We look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on the future of these discussions and options we can pursue that would truly end the threat of a nuclear-armed Iran. And I'll now turn to Mr. Brad Sherman of California for his remarks.